Hey, Pepin.
Yo, 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 yo.
Hey, have you ever seen a hollow bone in a suit?
A hollow bone in a suit. Is this like a Minecraft reference or something?
It could be. I think they have seals in Minecraft, but this isn't a seal. You know what
Hmm.
I'm talking about.
Is it like a plug then?
Are you getting back into butt stuff? Is that what we're talking about? No, I'm talking about a penguin.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah. But wait, where's the bone come in? Because it's like in a suit, right? But I get that much. But where's the bone?
Oh, we need to talk. Welcome back. So glad you guys could join us. I am here once again with my best friend Nathan Pepin. How's it going today, Pepin?
Doing well. Was this the whole like ploy to get me to say where's the bone? Like
We are joined once again by super special guest, co-host of the FilmSimps and comedy legend, Jere. How's it going today, Jere?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Well, I mean, I guess I know it's been going for an hour now, so yeah, I don't have to ask that. But that's going well for me.
I'm super glad to have you on today to talk about penguins that are a hollow bone tuxedoed friends.
Yeah, my favorite animal.
Are they hollow bone? Oh yeah, the birds. That's right, because birds don't necessarily. Okay, it all makes sense because but they don't fly.
Question answered. You can go home now.
Ah, yes. Okay. So the question we're gonna ask or answer here is: are penguins birds? And I think we can go some interesting places with that. But I think a more interesting place to start is what's the film Simps about?
The Film Sims is a film review show we do on Twitch, where we review movies, live react to trailers, and talk about the news of the day in entertainment.
Yeah, it's a very great show. Very high production value. Me and Meter were actually on an episode. I think Meter's actually on two episodes. But me and Meter were on a recent episode about Army of the Dead, I think it's called.
Yep.
Very interesting movie. We had some good discussion there, some good comedy. So, if you want to give it a try, that's a good episode to start with because, we're on it. But, any other episode would be great as well.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fun ones lately.
So here's the
Guys,
question.
I gotta be honest. Since we've started recording, I've gotten like 300 emails from ornithologists. They want you guys to know I'm wrong. Penguins don't have hollow bones.
So
I lied.
I guess that
I
makes
lied
sense.
to you, and by lied I mean was just wrong.
Well, it makes sense. It happens a lot, especially with you, Meter. So I understand.
Penguins, loons, and puffins all have solid bones, probably to help them dive better. But
Yeah,
yeah, makes sense.
that's right. Because if they had hollow bones, they probably wouldn't be able to sink very well.
exactly, like a
Yeah.
duck.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking about that because like birds usually have hollow bones for flight. That's the main kind of purpose behind them.
Right.
But,
Now,
okay.
I mean, puffins and loons can fly, so
They're special like that, but
Uh,
I think for the most part, Pepin's right. Birds have hollow bones so they can fly. Also, so they can just be delicate as shit. That is everyone's goal in the animal
Mhm.
kingdom.
right.
wait. Every animal's goal is to be delicate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Why not?
The classic trope of animals, their delicacy.
Yeah. Give me one good reason why it's a bad idea.
You know what? I don't have any.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So there's this idea of what makes anything, right? And there's so many different ways to come at this. But like, what makes a penguin a bird? You could go through some categories or some categorizations. Like it has wings, it's got a beak, it's got feathers, right? But there's also got stuff to it where maybe it's different. It has not hollow bones, apparently. It can't fly. I guess there's one species that can, or maybe another. And they do this whole thing where they bring rocks someplace. That's not very bird-like, but like there's all these different aspects to them. So what makes them a bird? Is it this clump of category, or is it something more unique to it?
Hmm. That's a good question. I would say they are birds because they don't fit in with other categories where that share some of their interests. Like they're not fish. Fish suck. They're creepy when you look at them in the eye. Birds or penguins, not so much. They're beautiful, like birds. So therefore, I think that makes them birds.
And Jere did go to bird school, so
Yeah.
So I think a big like modern consideration with categorizing animals at the very least is like taxonomy and genetics, because I think that's the biggest thing to look at, because the argument would be that penguins are birds because they share a very common ancestor to the bird lineage.
Mhm.
And that's what makes them birds. And it's a similar sort of way that they can kind of classify species in the oceans or any other species, like I think octopi and squids, and I'm trying to think what else. But there's this kind of genus called cephalopods that kind of fit this wider categorization. Now you can have like a lot of like speciation there. So like octopi are much different than squids, and octopi have pretty decent intelligence. Squids are generally pretty dumb. You can kind of go into other species such as like jellyfish. I don't think they're part of cephalopods, but I think they're part of like the anemone kind of class or speciation. But you can get these very wide differences, but these kind of like similarities. And, maybe genetics is the ultimate kind of termination there, but you can kind of apply this kind of a categorical framework to other things, outside, say, things with queer genuses, such as like chairs. What makes a chair a chair?
Yeah.
And those questions are very difficult to answer. What would you say kind of is the main kind of classifier of those kind of questions? Like, what makes a chair a chair? How's a chair different from a bench, per se?
That's a tough one. I was gonna say for penguins, it's it's definitely the genetics. For chairs, it's I think that's an eye of the beholder thing. Um, you know, what's I guess a chair would normally only seat one person, while a bench would seat multiples. Would be my off the cuff definition. And I hope I'm not canceled for being wrong.
Wow.
Whenever this gets on the air.
Hashtag cancel Jere.
Yeah, I know it's live, but
cancel Jere for chair. There we go.
No,
it rhymes.
Oh, man. You just got hashtag live and it rhymes.
I can't believe I walked right into a gotcha interview.
All right, let's change the title of this one to "Is Jere Canceled?"
Oh no, it wasn't even a thing I said on Twitter this time.
No, this all comes down to semantics, right?
Yeah.
Is there even a right answer, or is it just one person gets to decide and then we argue about it for the rest of the time?
So I don't know if it's semantical. I do think it is, say, cultural to some aspect. Like a good instance of that is like soup. So if soup is cold, is it soup?
Yeah.
Or is cereal soup? Right. Yeah. So that might be considered differently from culture. I would say, obviously, no. I know Meter's saying, yes, it is. But obviously, to me, cereal is not soup.
All right. Nate's trying to backdoor in a conversation that we had a long time ago called "Is a hot dog a sandwich?"
Okay.
And we know that the answer is yes, because everything's a sandwich.
True. Yes. And everything's a soup. I think that's pretty self-evident.
Everything's either a soup or a sandwich. Those are the two. Yeah. Those are the two classifications of life.
I agree.
So what are you basing that off of? Like, what's the identifying characteristics of, say, a sandwich?
Well, you see, it used to be something between two other things that are different than the original thing, but the same as each other. But then science had to go and culinary science had to go and break the whole world by creating the open-faced sandwich.
Right.
So if I can have a piece of turkey on top of a piece of bread and call that a fucking open-faced sandwich, then this pen on top of this phone is an open-faced phone pen sandwich.
Delicious every bite.
That's my argument.
I feel like that's a little bit of like a lawyer type kind of mindset right there.
Yeah.
Like you're catching it on technicality.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I would disagree with that because I think it's taking maybe a general definition and applying too much stringency to it.
Uh-huh.
And
Have we met? That's my whole deal.
so I think that's probably the problem, and I think it's the same problem with, say, birds. Right? Is a penguin a bird? Right? If you look at like any specific penguin, that penguin's going to be similar to other penguins, but that penguin's also going to be unique in its own sort of ways. But we still take a look at, say, similar penguins and kind of classify them together as a general category of say, penguins, right?
Yeah.
You can get to like a larger category of birds. Or we could talk about like chairs. Like obviously, what I'm sitting in is a chair. And you can look at other chairs and they're obviously chairs. But then you can kind of get to some sort of things. And is that a chair? Like imagine just like a box, right?
Is a toilet a chair?
Yes, I think so.
This is the important question. Is it kind of like a square and a rectangle? Like all toilets are chairs, but not all chairs are toilets?
Yeah, that works.
I mean, that's definitely true.
Yeah.
I think maybe what makes the toilet not a chair is that it doesn't have a solid base to it. It's got a hole in the middle, right? And you could say it's like a chair, right? I guess it's something used for sitting, but it's not something that supports. I guess it does support you.
So if I cut a hole in the chair you're sitting in right now, but you're still able to sit on it the same way, except it has a hole in the middle now, is that no longer a chair?
How big's the hole got to be before it's not a chair?
You know, I found myself asking that question a lot.
I think actually would still be a chair because it's still able to support your weight and it can be used for sitting. I think the less able it is for, say, sittability is the more it's not a chair. I guess the more it's not designed for sittability either, because imagine you're going through the woods and you see this like giant rock, and let's say the rock's got a like maybe not like a totally flat surface, but a flat enough surface. You can sit down on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is that rock a chair?
In that
being,
moment.
It's being used as a chair, but it's not a chair per se.
Things can be many things, Nathan. They don't have to only be one thing, and they can change what they are given the moment or its current use. But I think to get back to my original point, you're kind of playing directly into my point that this is a semantical argument. Because the first thing you did was give your rough definition of what a chair was without saying I'm giving a definition. You said, well, it has these characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that was your definition of what is a chair. And then does it fit my definition of what is a chair? That's a semantical argument.
Mm-hmm.
Is it semantical or is it definitional?
That's the same thing.
I don't know, because I think definitional arguments have some sort of real measurability to it, whereas semantical is more of a way of arranging things that don't actually affect the underlying thing.
All right, Google. Or relating to meaning or arising from distinctions between the meanings of different words or symbols. That is definitions.
So, like for me, semantics would be like, am I going to the supermarket? Am I driving to the supermarket? Am I going to meet you there, or are you going to meet me there? Like, they're all kind of true, and it's just the way you're presenting the information. But the underlying information is, it stays consistent, but the way it presentation or way of arranging the information is changing.
We're talking about the distinctions between the meanings of words. That's semantical. That's literally definitions. Like, how are we defining words? And that's what we're talking about.
So I think the word can have any sort of application to it. So I could say chair, right? Chair is an association of this thing right here, general characteristics of that, in the category of those things to that word. Now, whether you call it a chair, a doppelganger, or a garage doesn't quite matter. except for, say, means of communication. So to me, that's semantics, like what you call it. But associating the characteristics of the chair to that word is the definition. And maybe I'm splitting hairs here. Maybe we're getting semantical about the semantics, right?
I think we're talking about both things then. If we want to put a difference between those two things, I personally think they're damn near close to the same thing, if not the same thing. But regardless, the conversation we're having is both of those things. Because you're saying what makes a penguin a penguin? Well, the definition does, and also like just physically the word, like we all call it the same word.
Yeah, I think you could have like a definition without like a word, because you can kind of give like the overall definition without mentioning like the categorization, and that would suffice. But the categorize or the word itself that kind of cements that is just more a convenience factor, because otherwise we have to give the complete description of the general category or the more definitional sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Are you describing why we choose to use words?
Pretty much. Pretty much.
The ultimate semantic argument. Or the first one. Okay.
We finally gotten to the bottom of it. All of our arguments have come to this.
So, Jere, how would you kind of weigh in on this kind of, say, the debate here?
Give me my choices, because I am like I lost track a little bit where we were going.
So, with considering what something is, how do you determine what something is? Like, what's the methodology?
All right, I would say it's the characteristics. I think are the things that I would look at. The characteristics versus what the definition of what that thing is and how many of them match up. Because I think the actual name of a thing doesn't really matter, because languages, but if we could all agree that a penguin has XYZ characteristics, and therefore that's a penguin, and it's a bird, and birds have ABC, and penguins maybe have 2 out of 3 or something like that, like a chair versus a couch or whatever. As long as the characteristics are matching up within a certain threshold that I don't have, probably depends on the thing. I think that's the best way to determine what a thing is.
So, Nate, is your problem in the specification? Like, as we get more and more specific? Because, like, we're saying, is this thing a chair? Well, maybe we pull it back some and we say, is it seating first? And then if we decide, okay, it falls under that category, now let's go down to the next layer of specification. Which one does it fall under? And slowly get down smaller and smaller and smaller. Is that kind of where we're going here?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think the words also have a sort of like extra hidden meaning to them. So like with a chair, like I think what defines a chair partially is that it was something that was made with the intention of sitting. Something that's being used as a chair didn't have that intentional aspect to it. So a rock in the middle of the woods that happens to be good for seating is not a chair because it wasn't intended, but it can still be used for sitting. Therefore, it can be used as a chair.
What if I told you God specifically made that chair for me to use in the woods, that rock to be used as a chair, and that was capital H, his intention?
That's a good question.
I'm not religious at all, but let's say I truly believe that about that rock.
I mean, in that case, if you could see it, if that's your belief, then for you, it'd definitely be a chair. I couldn't argue against that.
Okay.
What if it wasn't a chair, right? It was a rock. And then you built your house next to it, and the only thing you've ever used it for since is as a chair. Does that not become a chair at that point?
I don't think so. To some degree, for you, yes. But I think the other people, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to sit down in the chair over here. And people would kind of give you a funny look, because obviously that wasn't like designed to be a chair.
That's true.
But wouldn't they get it though? Like, because of the circumstances of, they look around, I have a house made of twigs. I have like all of the things that I have a pattern to the way that I'm naming things. Like that's my house, and it's like a hole in a tree that was
Mhm.
naturally there. And then when I say I'm gonna sit down in the chair, and they look around, they're like, that's got to be the chair. Like
Mhm.
you can take the definition, kind of stretch it because of context.
Mhm.
I kind of got to side with Pepin on this one because I feel like if you invite people over and you're like, I have plenty of chairs for everyone to sit on, and then they show up and there's just a bunch of rocks, there will be some confusion. Like people will get it, will figure it out once you kind of tell them in some way. But I think they'll be like, where are the chairs? You promised chairs. All I see are rocks. Would be the normal reaction.
What if I put two rocks next to each other, one flat and one with a back, so it looks like a chair?
Well,
Is it a chair?
yeah, because you have designed it for the intention of sitting,
So
right?
there has to be design for a chair to be a chair.
I'd say so.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And I don't know. I think if something like had the aspects of looking like it was designed to be a chair, I think that could also count too. If it was like incidental, like if someone wouldn't know this, let's say two rocks happen to fall in a certain way, and it just looks like a stone throne, right? Which is a throne type of chair. So I think that would qualify for that definition too, because there is a level of, say, knowledge there, because you don't necessarily know something was designed. You just assume it's designed based off the way it looks to you, right? If this happened that nature just fell to that sort of way, then it's the same sort of state, right? You're always kind of guessing. So I think yes, if it ended up in that way.
I guess my argument is that there are two definitions to everything. There is the out of context definition and the in context definition.
Mhm.
If you take a thing, if you take a rock and put it in a blank white room and you have somebody go in, 0 people are going to call that a chair. They're all going to call it a rock, right? If you have just normal ass people. But if you put it in a very specific situation, that rock could be called a chair by people. Maybe not everybody, but by certain people or by people in a situation. And then on top of that, if I give it that definition and call it a chair and tell people, hey, go ahead and take a seat in my chair, and they sit down on the rock, they will adapt and put that definition onto that thing. And it's completely acceptable because we all are in agreement that's what we're calling that thing, regardless of its context outside of that specific situation.
Yeah.
I would have a general level of agreement with that, but I think that is just kind of like the generality of language. Like, I think we can kind of give and take, maybe not all the times, because I've been corrected on many things I've said because I'm trying to, like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I have like the general descriptors for it. So, I might call something incorrectly and, maybe get corrected for it. But, once I learn what the actual name of it is, I'll kind of use that name. Like, I don't know, like maybe I don't know what a vestibule is, but I'll say, the place where it's kind of like the entrance to the house, but it's not really a room that kind of is, maybe I'll say something like that, but then I'll learn the actual word for it. So I do think there's a generality to it. And it's actually a great example of that, where famous physicist Richard Feynman, he was actually in an anatomy class and they were doing a dissection, and he asked the teacher, hey, can I see the map of the cat? And they're really confused for a bit there. And eventually they're like, wait, you mean an anatomical chart? And he's like, yeah, that, sure. Now, map of the...
Isn't that the point of language?
Well, so I think the issue is communication, though, because if you start making your own kind of wording for things, like the level of communication and thinking someone has to do to understand what you mean goes up exponentially.
Right. It breaks down at some point.
But I think the opposite's true, that you can think you're on the same page. You could have a whole conversation with someone, think you guys are on the same page, and end up having completely different points come across. And that arguably is a worse level of miscommunication, because you both think that you're communicating well. At least with a cat map, there's something lost in translation. And then when you realize you're on the same page, you're on the same page, versus never even possibly knowing that you had a miscommunication.
I think so.
I think it's a risk. The language is not static. in a way that everyone understands everything. It's a little bit up to definition. I think the key is offering enough context that what you mean comes through. Like if you just had a bunch of rocks outside your house and you called them chairs, that might be confusing. But if you had, say, a bunch of rocks lined up in a row and then like a projector screen facing them, and you were told me that that's like your couch or whatever, I'd be like, oh yeah, I get it. There's enough context for me to understand what you mean by to have a seat.
Yeah.
In that case, it's kind of like the intentionality behind the thing is there, but maybe not from the thing itself, but the context is in.
Yeah.
And that's kind of giving it that aspect of intentionality.
Yeah.
But I do think that words are important for communicating, and maybe that disconnect there is important. But I also think that kind of having this, you still want a low barrier, right? And if you're not sure what something is, I think making that kind of clear in your question is important, because I do that a lot myself. If I don't quite know what I'm talking about, I'll kind of say something in a way that makes it clear I'm kind of uncertain, but kind of and like I know what I'm talking about, but I don't know what I'm saying exactly.
Right.
And just a little follow up with that. And one instance where I think this happens a lot is in the legal discussions, like where people are being prosecuted. There's often two levels of conversation happening, especially with very skilled prosecutors, because there's like, say, the normal kind of conversations happening where it sounds like what you're talking about is very just like evidentiary or just very kind of casual. Maybe not casual is the word, but then those words have legal context that people aren't aware of. So that's kind of the higher level. And a lot of times what will happen is people will be in depositions or talks, and there's a legal meaning that's not associated or known, being asked the client or, whoever's being deposed, and they won't be aware of those high level legal contexts. And then they get held accountable for those legal definitions that they weren't aware they're agreed on. So I think that is also an indication of, say, maybe specific meetings that aren't aware of and being held accountable to those. That's obviously a bad example of it, but it does play out in everyday life where sometimes you think you have that agreement in that meeting and you don't. And sometimes, it's unclear whether you have that kind of connection there, and, kind of inspect it.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
So does that make a penguin a bird?
I think so. Or
Yeah.
maybe. I mean, I think obviously, like we said, what makes a penguin a bird is a little bit it's a little bit more straightforward as opposed to, say, other topics, because that's genetic aspect to it. You could disagree about the genetics of it, but you can kind of get into other stuff like fish, right? Like there is a strict biological definition of fish. But I think the colloquial definition often overrides that. Like, are dolphins fish? You might say no. Oh, you'd say no, Jere?
I would say no. Yeah, they're mammals, aren't they? Am I thinking of the right thing? I think so.
Yeah. So that's the biological kind of definition there, and that kind of goes to genetics there.
Yeah.
I would be comfortable saying that dolphins are fish, because to me, fish is more colloquially, I wouldn't say this in a biological context, but colloquially, fish are things that just kind of have fins, swim in like water, right? A crab wouldn't be a fish because it doesn't have fins, and it's not kind of like, I don't know, elongated shape, like kind of the shape is a big factor of it. So dolphin would be a fish for me. If I was writing a scientific paper, no. But if I'm just talking, like, oh yeah, dolphins are a type of fish that swim in the ocean, I think that would be fine.
So you're saying context matters in the definition?
I wouldn't say, yeah, context matters, because in the scientific context, they need very, very specific definitions to actually function, And so when you say fish, there needs to be no question about what you mean by fish. And often the definition of fish will kind of correlate to the genetics of the thing. And in everyday kind of context, like, it doesn't really matter so much that we have a, clear definitional like specificity to it, so we can get more general with it.
Yeah, definitely.
And
if you're just talking with your friends, who cares what a fish is? If you're just gonna say like, oh yeah, all the fish in the ocean, you don't have to specify fish, and also dolphins, and also whales, and crabs as well. That would be a weird way a very admirably inclusive way to describe the ocean. but also just kind of a weird way if you're not specifically really talking about those animals.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think we should continue this in the next episode, and let's talk about the ship of Theseus, because I think that's a great example here. So, hey, next episode, ship of Theseus with FilmSimps. Jere, you're awesome. Definitely subscribe. Look at the description. You should see all the links there. You guys have a great day, because we need to talk.